went to bed in 2017 and woke up and it was 1903. No power, no light, no water, no cell phones. I mean, it was just like nothing was working. You didn't know how your loved ones were doing except the ones that you had in your immediate vicinity. Hospitals are without power. Doctors were doing procedures with the flashlight from their cell phones. So it's like, you're on your own. What are you going to do now?
There's a lot of love in this room. A lot of love in this room. Great people.
We are also praying for the people of Puerto Rico. We love Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico. And we also love Puerto Rico.
The response to Maria was really like a poster child of the relationship between, Puerto Rico and the United States. The situation in Maria was not just created by Maria, but Maria lays bare the reality. It strips it down to its bare bones, and you can really see that colonialism still exists in a few places, and Puerto Rico is one of them. Our actions were aimed at getting people to say, yes, it is possible to resist and break the colonized mentality that these guys can't be beat or that there's nothing we can do to change the situation, that sense of impotence.
En la década de los 70, cuando Juan Segarra tenía 20 años, él decidió luchar por la independencia de su patria. Aunque muchos puertorriqueños estaban disgustados con la falta de autonomía política, solamente un pequeño % abogaba por la independencia plena de los Estados Unidos. Aún menos optaron por el camino de Juan, de acciones armadas y asaltos a bancos.
The last one I did was 33 years ago. Most of the times, my role was as the protection against the police coming. So I was ready to engage in gunfire if it had to be to protect my comrades from getting caught, so I had thought that through.
La isla de Puerto Rico fue colonizada inicialmente por los españoles en el 1508. Luego, en el 1898, pasó a ser colonia americana, pero ha mantenido su identidad cultural propia. Hoy día, casi 3,5 millones de personas viven aquí, una población mayor de la de 21 estados de los Estados Unidos. Sin embargo, casi la mitad de la población vive en la pobreza. Puerto Rico es un territorio de los Estados Unidos, sin poder para desafiar las acciones del gobierno de los Estados Unidos que afectan a su gente. Sus residentes no tienen voto en el Congreso, ni en las elecciones presidenciales.
We had a subscription to Time magazine, and there was an issue in which the cover story was on prep schools in the U.S. And I read it, and Andover was covered prominently there, and it said they had 7 indoor basketball courts. So that made it for me. I said, wow. I had like a shark skin suit, which I thought was so cool. And the first time I walk into the dining hall, maybe half an hour after my parents left, and I felt homesickness. And as soon as I walk into the chow hall, take maybe 10 steps, some guy goes, "Hey, Spick." You know, that's the first time I'd heard that word, let alone addressed at me. But I went up and slapped him in the face, you know, as hard as I could, just a whap! And he was so shocked that he didn't do anything. And I went into the coat room to hang up my coat and then go into the dining room. And, you know, I said, holy shit, what have I gotten myself into at this place? Senior year at Andover, my professor for American history, Mr. Len James, he said, "Cigar, would you like to do a term paper in lieu of the final exam?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Why don't you do a paper on the Spanish-American War?" And I did, and I came to Harvard to widen the library, to the bowels of the library to read the congressional record. And there's nothing like reading these guys talk unfiltered. On the one side, there were those referring to us practically as monkeys, and like these brown races and this and that, how can we? And then you had guys like William Jennings Bryan and the anti-imperialists saying this betrays all of what the United States is about. You know, we fought the colonies, we fought for independence. What are we? We're going to become empire now.
Durante más de 400 años, Puerto Rico sufrió como colonia española. Pero en el 1897, España le otorgó a la isla un grado de autonomía. Muchos esperaban que esto fuera un paso hacia la independencia, pero resultó ser un callejón sin salida. Escasos meses después de las primeras elecciones en Puerto Rico, los Estados Unidos invadieron la isla. En cuestión de 10 semanas, se truncaron las esperanzas de la independencia cuando los Estados Unidos anexó la isla. Y luego, en el 1917, la Ley Jones convirtió a los puertorriqueños en ciudadanos americanos.
You know, so like, okay, you're going to make you American citizens, which you didn't ask for. Even if we were offered the citizenship of heaven, we would prefer our own. My dad's drinking buddies at one of their get-togethers, they said, "Papa, come here." And I said, "Do you feel more Puerto Rican now or before you went to Andover?" And I said, well, I hadn't thought of that until that moment, you know. And I said, well, I feel more Puerto Rican now. My dad said, well, Papa, you're the only Puerto Rican here, so you know what you got to do. Okay. You guys in line for rubbing the statue, or?
Are you supposed to rub it?
I don't know if you were supposed to. I know I see a lot of people doing it, so.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. Okay, who's next? I do know that that's not John Harvard.
No.
No, because he was dead by the time they did that. So it was some young man posed for John Harvard.
Okay.
The year is not right, and he wasn't just the founder, because he was one of a whole
One of
group.
them.
So that's why they say this is the statue of the three lies.
Oh, okay. It's not the year. Nice.
That was my dorm room window on the top floor there. As I looked down that morning, it was just starting to be light. There was a mist still on the yard, which added to this kind of surreal quality. And there was a ring of policemen setting up an outer perimeter. I mean, they all had these helmets on with visors, and they set up a gauntlet on this door here.
The policemen are pushing spectators, bystanders.
And then you could hear the screaming and everything else, and then started seeing the guys, the students who were in the building, being evicted one by one.
Anywhere in sight. The policemen are hitting them very hard. They're not just trying to push the people away. We know there's a fight on the other side.
They grab you by the hair and just pulled you down, and as they brought you down the stairs, they're kicking you and hitting you until you got to the paddy wagon, threw you in the paddy wagon, filled the paddy wagon, drove it out, and then brought the next one in.
Trampled. I see a policeman picking out someone who is apparently injured and stepped on.
That was what basically made the break for me from being an advocate of peaceful change and thinking that, you know, we could change things peacefully, to understanding that these guys had to be fought in a different way. And for me, that was the beginning of my radicalization.
We see a policeman there beating up a student. The municipal policemen are being used to hold the crowd back. Dean Glint has told the people inside the building.
50 años previo a esto, otro estudiante puertorriqueño se matriculó en Harvard, Pedro Albizu Campos. En el 1921 se graduó de la Escuela de Derecho de Harvard con el promedio más alto de su clase.
And, you know, one of the most privileged minds that Puerto Rico has produced, and was not recognized as such because, you know, he was black Puerto Rican, so not happening.
Luego de Harvard, Albizu Campos regresa a Puerto Rico, donde ve a los monopolios azucareros de Estados Unidos extraer ganancias mayores de los obreros de la caña que en ningún otro lugar en el mundo.
The first civilian governor of Puerto Rico, some guy by the name of Allen, who had been a government official up in the States, came down, and before his administration was done, almost all agriculture, what had been small farms and stuff like that, had been ruined. And Domino Sugar came into existence. And now the sugar plantation system had come into effect. The guy became, you know, one of the wealthiest people in the United States off of the backs and the suffering of thousands of Puerto Rican families that lost their lands and, you know, lost their self-sufficiency and independence and had to then go work as peons in the farms.
En el 1934, Albizu Campos organizó a los cortadores de caña, o macheteros, para irse a la huelga en contra de las compañías azucareras americanas. No se hace esperar una represión cruenta. Pero los huelguistas prevalecen y el salario se duplica a $1.50 diarios. Alentado, Albizu Campos forma los Cadetes de la República, quienes toman un juramento de luchar por la independencia de Puerto Rico. El Domingo de Ramos del 1937 organizan una marcha pacífica. En el último momento, el gobernador colonial revoca el permiso para congregarse y los rodean 200 policías, algunos de ellos armados con ametralladoras Thompson. Sin provocación alguna, la policía comienza a disparar. Los manifestantes y los espectadores intentan huir. Un abanderado es el primero que matan. Una niña de 7 años recoge la bandera y le disparan de inmediato. Un cadete herido, Bolívar Márquez, se arrastra hacia la pared y escribe con su propia sangre: ¡Viva la República! ¡Abajo los asesinos! Hay 235 heridos, 19 muertos, incluso la niña de 7 años. $20,000 personas asistieron a las ceremonias fúnebres. No se responsabilizó a ningún policía.
I didn't know any of that when I was growing up. But, you know, I was like this. What did I know? It wasn't until years later that I began to have a different historical perspective on Puerto Rico. And, you know, the gag law that made flying the Puerto Rican flag by itself illegal and punishable by prison. You know, you couldn't speak in favor of independence or you'd be thrown into prison.
En el 1948, la Ley 53, o Ley de la Mordaza, declara un delito el desplegar la bandera puertorriqueña, el hablar a favor de la independencia o cantar una canción patriótica podría conllevar 10 años de cárcel. En el 1950, los nacionalistas se levantan en toda la isla, llevando a cabo ataques coordinados contra cuarteles de la policía, la fortaleza y el Tribunal Federal. La Guardia Nacional responde con artillería pesada, morteros, granadas y bombarderos P-47. Esta es la primera vez que aviones de guerra de los Estados Unidos lanzan ataques en territorio americano. En la secuela, arrestan a 2,000 puertorriqueños en redadas. En respuesta, 2 nacionalistas forman un plan.
Outside Blair House, the president's temporary Washington home, extreme fanatics of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party try to force their way in, guns blazing, to assassinate the President of the United States. Assassin Oscar Collazo and 2 other guards are wounded as the plot is foiled. At Washington's emergency hospital, a 24-hour guard watches over Collazo, who, despite a chest wound, recovers to face trial for murder.
They had tried to kill me, and I knew that they'd try it again. I knew who they were. They were a bunch of fanatics that wanted an independent Puerto Rico.
Actually, one of the common views is that the nationalists rose up like a bunch of nuts and the government squashed them. In fact, it was the U.S. government policy, the governor's policy, to push these guys into a corner, get them to a point where it's either give up or go down fighting. And so they were pushed into that situation, and then of course they responded and fought, crushed in a way that it was like, you know, like when they put, when the invaders, you know, put down all the freedom fighters, cut their heads off and put them on a pike so everybody else knows that don't mess with us because this is what's waiting for you. I was approached by somebody I trusted very much, and he said, listen, there's the underground movement is being organized in Puerto Rico for independence, and you know, we think you're a good candidate. What do you say? I said, yes. You know, because I foresaw the armed struggle was going to be necessary, and I knew that there wasn't going to be a surplus of people willing to do that, and I felt that, you know, I had had so many privileges in my life that it was my obligation to, you know, time to do a little sacrifice and step up.
En el 1954, 4 puertorriqueños residentes en Nueva York deciden que están dispuestos a sacrificar sus vidas por la independencia. Desde la prisión, Albizu Campos se comunica con ellos y les da una misión: llevar la lucha por la independencia al público americano. El grupo compra ropa dominguera y boletas de ida solamente hacia Washington, D.C. Entonces, entran en el Capitolio mientras el Congreso está en sesión. Lolita Lebrón dirige al grupo rezando el Padre Nuestro. Entonces, se pone de pie y grita desde las gradas: ¡Viva Puerto Rico libre!
Gunfire in the House of Representatives sends police and crowds rushing to the Capitol. Disheveled and wild-eyed, a Puerto Rican fanatic, Rafael Miranda, is photographed moments after he and a fellow terrorist, Andres Cordero, had joined with Lolito Lebron in pouring more than 20 shots at the crowded House floor. 5 congressmen are wounded in the murderous attack. Still grimly defiant, the woman is hustled from the angry, menacing crowd.
I am a Puerto Rican woman that claims for freedom for my country. And I would like this that happened today awake the conscience of the men of goodwill of the world and of the government of the United States to free Puerto Rico immediately. I didn't come to kill here nobody.
What did you come here for?
To ask for freedom in some way, because all other ways have been tried, and the country of Puerto Rico still is not a free country. It's the only country in the New World still is segregated.
Didn't you think that you hurt somebody if you fired into the...
Sir, I came here just to give a brief statement, not to answer all your questions. I'm sorry.
For most Americans, there's no context to that. It's like, these guys are totally insane. You know, these fanatics for Puerto Rico independence. Well, you know, when we've done such good for them, how could they do that?
La investigación criminal revela que Lolita Lebrón disparó su arma de fuego hacia el techo, sin herir a nadie. La policía del Capitolio encuentra una nota en su bolso. Entrego mi vida por la libertad de mi país. Los Estados Unidos está traicionando los principios sagrados de la humanidad al continuar subyugando a mi país.
Part of the whole colonialist and anti-colonial struggle narrative is that the sense of impotence, okay, or the dependency that is felt, and the impotence that's corollary to that, and the need to break that. The need to break the mentality of like you have to take whatever you got. You know, if you can't fight these guys, they're too big. You know, there's an injustice. Well, so be it. And that's what in effect happened for the rest of that generation. If you resist, you're going to end up in jail forever, like the nationalists. The consequences were serious, and that's why there's a lot of the mentality of, maybe I don't like it, but let's keep quiet for now. It's a powerful cocktail to really hurt the mental health and self-esteem of a whole country.
Filiberto Ojeda Ríos nació en Puerto Rico en la década del 1930. De niño, vio a sus abuelos perder sus tierras a los monopolios azucareros norteamericanos. Fue testigo de la masacre de Ponce. Vio la muerte del colonialismo en el mundo, pero vio que permanecía tenazmente en su tierra. Ya a sus 20 años, habiéndose convertido en un exitoso músico de jazz, renunció a su carrera de trompetista y comenzó a luchar por la independencia. Para Filiberto Ojeda, estaba claro que los Estados Unidos no iba a cambiar por cuenta propia.
Si uno cree en la libertad, si uno sabe que su pueblo está siendo oprimido, si uno tiene totalmente el convencimiento de que estamos viviendo un país colonizado, de que fuimos invadidos, de que nos mataron, de que están destruyendo nuestro pueblo, que se aplique el genocidio de día a día, destruir al enemigo es salvar la patria.
En el otoño del 1969, decenas de bombas explotan en Puerto Rico. Y hoteles, casinos y tiendas por departamento americanos, tales como Sheraton, Howard Johnson's y Woolworths, fueron atacados. Hubo pocos heridos, pero cientos de miles de dólares en daños. Filiberto Ojeda se refería a estas acciones como propaganda armada.
¿Sabe? Es una guerra. Y sería una guerra popular, una guerra del pueblo, una guerra de salvación nacional, una guerra justa.
In 1972, when I first met Filiberto, and we sat down on a bench like this, and I had the first conversation with the man that I was to follow for many years, and that path changed my life. My expectation was that either we won or I would end up in prison or dead. Those were the three options, and felt that more likely than not, prison or death would be the more likely outcomes. But at that time in my life, I was ready to take on that risk and that responsibility. If none of that had happened, I would have ended up being a lawyer like everybody else in my family. I caught myself just in time before I entered that path and took the road less traveled.
En el 1976, Filiberto Ojeda y Juan Segarra se unieron con otros que luchaban por la independencia y formaron los Macheteros.
The context was that Vietnam had won. The Cuban Revolution at that time was like a beacon to a lot of Latin America. The tide of history is on the side of anti-colonialism. We should be able to prevail. One of the first things you have to have is, fake ID. So I visited a number of graveyards and picked, someone who had died, as a child, who wasn't likely to have a social security number or any other type of ID, and then applied for that birth certificate, and then applied for driver's license and social security number, and developed a number of IDs that I then used to buy weapons with. I had already begun to prepare myself for the revolution. And one of the things that I had done was to learn how to handle weapons, and for that purpose I had joined the Harvard Pistol Club. And so one of the first things that I was able to do for the organization was to help train other comrades in the proper use and handling of weapons. And for that, we used this facility here, which was at that time the Harvard Pistol Club. It was kind of complicated because we had to do it Saturday mornings super early when no one else would show up. I would open the door for Filiberto, and then the other comrades would come in, put on ski masks while I was looking the other way. I would put on a ski mask, and then we would proceed into the range where we'd do our training. So that way we would maintain that compartmentalization of not knowing who each other was, even though we were working so closely. As a full-time member of the organization, my routine was, after I did my household obligation of taking the kids to school, I would then start working on whatever we had on the schedule. If we were going to do a bank, check out the bank. We were going to go take the dynamite from a construction depot, go do that. There was a strike on against the power company, checking out the transmission towers to see if we were going to knock one of them out. We sabotaged the power plant at the beginning of Condado Lagoon as a protest against the government for cutting off the power to the residents of Villa Sin Miedo, which was a squatter settlement.
Los residentes del rescate llamado Villa Sin Miedo se habían conectado a las líneas eléctricas y entonces el gobierno amenazaba con desahuciarlos por la fuerza.
So, when they had their power cut off, we said, all right, well, tit for tat. So it turns out that the radiators, are, of course, made of aluminum. And so all we had to do was bring in some of these spelunking hammers that have a sharp tip and just pip, 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 hit the radiator vanes on this thing, and then all the oil would come out, the thing would already blow up. So, it was a pretty simple little operation.
La operación tumbó la electricidad de una de las áreas más pudientes de la isla. Decenas de miles de huéspedes de los hoteles se quedaron a oscuras. Los macheteros dejan un comunicado clavado a un árbol en San Juan, asumiendo responsabilidad por la acción.
We felt that we could generate more of a spirit of resistance rather than of submissive acceptance of a reality that we felt was like shockingly unfair.
A pesar de operar en los márgenes violentos del movimiento independentista, sus acciones cobran notoriedad y llevan a otros a resistir. Desde el 1898, los Estados Unidos han utilizado a Puerto Rico como un bastión militar en el Caribe, llegando a construir decenas de bases militares. Entonces, en la década de los 40, la Marina de Guerra ocupó la mayor parte de la isla de Vieques para llevar a cabo sus ejercicios militares.
The admiral just called in and said, look, we're going to be bombing on X days. And then this fisherman said, you know all those old fishing traps? Let's take all that rope and we put them across where the Navy ships are going to come through. And their propellers will get tangled and they'll be dead in the water.
People who live here say they've had enough of the Navy and its shelling. And there were some like Mrs. Hilda Lugo de Vere. She brought her children because, she said, by setting up camp there, they would learn not to be afraid to defend their country.
Las manifestaciones resultan en cientos de arrestos, pero algunos miembros de los macheteros piensan que las manifestaciones no están funcionando y hacen un llamado a algo más que desobediencia civil.
In Puerto Rico today, a United States Navy bus was ambushed by political terrorists firing rifles, shotguns, and pistols.
18 unarmed Navy technicians were going to work in the school bus when the terrorists ambushed them just outside San Juan. 2 were killed and 10 were wounded, including 3 women.
3 grupos dejaron un comunicado conjunto en un teléfono público cercano, tomando responsabilidad por el atentado. Uno de estos es los macheteros. Ellos dicen que el atentado fue en represalia por un manifestante de Vieques, a quien mataron mientras se encontraba bajo custodia de la policía, y que las acciones continuarán hasta que Vieques se le devuelva al pueblo de Puerto Rico.
The movement held the Navy accountable. If you kill a prisoner and then claim it's suicide when clear forensic evidence show that he had gashes and bruises all over his body, you have to pay a price.
If they think they're going to drive us out of Vieques with acts like this, they better think again.
People of Puerto Rico don't support this type of activity. In the country, they reject it very vociferously and very strongly. We repudiate this type of action, and we think of these people as our enemies of the people of Puerto Rico.
Luego del atentado, hay disensión interna entre los macheteros. Muchos miembros optan por irse de la organización.
Well, the conclusion was that we were going to face some very serious repression as a result of that.
¿Se justifican entonces las muertes que surgieron de los actos de los macheteros?
Mire, el problema es el siguiente, y esto usted tiene que ponerlo en el contexto colonial. Esto es un país intervenido militarmente. Entonces la ley internacional permite a los pueblos colonizados luchar por su liberación.
Am I sorry that I took on the monster? Am I sorry that I decided to fight for my country? No, I'm not. I mean, could I have done things differently? Yes, absolutely. Do I now think that violence is not the means to achieve anything? Absolutely, yeah. that's a lesson learned in life for me.
La base Muñiz de la Guardia Nacional Aérea fue construida en el 1956 por las Fuerzas Armadas de los Estados Unidos. Los aviones estacionados ahí se habían utilizado para proyectar el poderío militar norteamericano a través de toda América Latina. En el 1981, una docena de macheteros disfrazados de pescadores infiltran la base y comienzan operaciones de reconocimiento.
At first blush, it looks like, whoa, can this be done? And then upon closer examination, you realize it's not a piece of cake, but it's definitely doable. I made the mistake of not including Filiberto. And he said, well, where's my position? And I said, you're not participating, you know. And he said, well, yes, I am. I think he was more aware than the rest of us of how significant this was going to be in terms of the historical importance. And then the final gift was when the National Guard had an open house on the base. So I brought my kids in to look at the planes, went right up to the planes, took pictures of them. You know? And that helped us establish exactly where the explosives was going to be located.
Before dawn today in Puerto Rico, terrorists blew up a number of Air National Guard jet fighters at an American base near San Juan. At least 8 jet fighters were destroyed.
The Corsair jets blew up one after the other. Damage was estimated at $45 million. No one was hurt. A leftist group, which says it wants the United States out of Puerto Rico, has claimed responsibility for the attack. Air Force spokesmen say this is one of the most serious attacks ever against an American military base here or in the United States.
So I didn't get back home until a couple of hours later, and Lucy thought that I had been killed. Once the plane started to blow up, they were loaded with their machine guns. And so the machine guns started to fire. And so since, you know, she heard all the gunshots and stuff, she figured that there had been a firefight. And people heard it miles away because of the effect of the water. And for us, we heard it in a very dull, like, boom, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, you know.
En la madrugada del día siguiente, el FBI encuentra un machete enterrado en el suelo, a pocos metros de la caseta de los guardias de seguridad de la base. Un mensaje de que los macheteros habían estado suficientemente cerca como para quitarle la vida al guardia, pero a diferencia del atentado del autobús, esta vez habían asegurado que nadie resultara herido. Un documento interno de los macheteros celebra el ataque. Fuimos capaces de revivir el espíritu de nuestro pueblo, ya que este fue el golpe más contundente que se le haya dado a los Yankees desde Pearl Harbor. El prestigio de nuestra organización aumentó grandemente. Nos ha dado a conocer en el mundo entero.
And I was surprised by how much tacit support there was and how many people were almost like secretly proud. And of course you can't let on. You know, so you're just sitting, people are commenting about that, and I said, okay, yeah, you know, just.
Se corre la voz sobre la resistencia en Puerto Rico, más allá de la isla. Líderes tales como el Papa Juan Pablo II, Robert Kennedy Jr. y Jesse Jackson, todos abogan porque la Marina de Guerra de los Estados Unidos se marche de Vieques. En el 2003, luego de casi 60 años de bombardeos, la Marina cesa operaciones activas en la isla Nena. El movimiento de los macheteros está casi en la quiebra. Filiberto Ojeda escribe: tenemos una enorme necesidad de recursos económicos y lo que tenemos en caja refleja un balance de cero. Por lo tanto, es necesario expropiar recursos.
Well, the first robbery that I participated in, I was sure we were going to get caught. You know, I'd seen so many TV programs and movies that I felt that, you know, we weren't going to get away with it. And this elderly lady came in and she started to hyperventilate and was about ready to scream, and I'm going, ma'am, calm down, nothing's gonna happen, or whatever. I really didn't know how to handle the situation. And then Filiberto he saw that and he walked over and said, shut up! And the poor woman went, and that was the end of that. So I said, okay, that's how it's done. And you know, so that was my trial by fire. There's an erroneous view of Los Macheteros that it was mostly about armed action, which is absolutely not the case. It was mostly about political action. And, you know, people were doing good work around women's issues, doing good work, you know, try to get the Navy out of Vieques, you know, all of that. So most of the robberies were done to fund that type of work, you know, rather than wait for proposals for grants to be approved and say, okay, well, we'll go get our own funds. This guy approached me and he says, you know, he's working on an armored truck and he transports between $7 to $10 million every Monday, and he wants to donate it to the struggle. It's like, whoa, it's almost too good to be true.
This is El Escambrón Beach. This is where he met Filiberto. And Filiberto did the final vetting of him as a combatant. And also, Filiberto talked to him in a way that nobody else could, you know, as to what it was going to mean to be a fugitive living underground. He was able to weigh, you know, could Victor pull this off, you know, psychologically, emotionally, you know, from a human point of view, not just from the operational point of view, because operationally it was pretty much, you know, a soft target. I mean, how often do you have an inside man in a depot with $10 million sitting there? You know, it just happens once in a lifetime.
We did several role plays in motels in the Hartford area. We rented a room, and so he practiced grabbing me by the neck and taking me down to the ground. So there was going to be no question about him being able to immobilize the guy with the element of surprise and then take him down.
Somewhere tonight, a Wells Fargo guard, an ex-Wells Fargo guard, is on the run with $7 million in cash. He got away with it last night when he robbed his partner and a Wells Fargo manager in West Hartford, Connecticut.
So when Victor grabbed a supervisor from behind, you know, put him in a headlock and took his supervisor's own gun out of his holster and put it to his head and told him, you know, I'm not working for anybody else anymore. You know, I'm not playing. The supervisor had, you know, heard the tone in Victor's voice. That, you know, as he testified in trial, he said, Victor spoke to me in a tone of voice I had never heard before. I was waiting for him outside. It was the longest hour or whatever of my entire life. It was $7.1 million, according to the press. I know it weighed about 1,000 and some odd pounds. You know, the car was riding low.
The thief had so much money to steal from here that he couldn't even haul it all away. Police estimate that he left about $1 million behind.
I felt we had pulled off a great job. Nobody had been caught. Nobody was hurt. Yeah, I was arrogant. My friend loaned me his pickup truck and camper. We were on the turnpike in Pennsylvania going down this pretty steep hill, and this semi blew past us. And we ended up flipped over, facing in the opposite direction on the right-hand lane of the vehicle. The money that was hidden in the wall, behind the walls of the trailer, you know, the panels burst. One of us jumped in the trailer and started throwing the money in bags and stashing it back before the state police arrived. And, you know, we got past that one.
A special agent must realize that no case ever ends for the Federal Bureau of Investigation until it is solved and closed with the conviction of the guilty or the acquittal of the innocent.
El FBI llegó a Puerto Rico medio siglo antes, pero en vez de dedicarse a perseguir delincuentes, a los agentes se le encargó aplastar las voces de aquellos que trabajaban para obtener la independencia. La misión crece rápidamente. Los agentes crean expedientes de más de 100,000 personas de interés, generando casi 2 millones de páginas de documentos. Los agentes recopilan información sobre afiliación política, empleo, prácticas religiosas y compañeros sentimentales. Pero a pesar de la vigilancia masiva, Filiberto Ojeda y Juan Segarra continúan evadiendo al FBI por más de una década.
Stopped right around here and took a shot at there, and you might, I wonder if they fixed it.
En el 1983, los macheteros usan los fondos del robo de la Wells Fargo para comprar un lanzacohetes de hombro. El plan es atacar las oficinas del FBI en San Juan. En vez de darle a las oficinas del FBI, fallan, causando daños al Departamento de Agricultura. El ser atacados directamente fortalece la búsqueda de los malcheteros por parte del FBI y en cuestión de semanas tienen una nueva lista de objetivos de vigilancia.
And the fact that it was an attack to the FBI office, of course, made them feel very personally committed to that investigation. And so, you know, they threw in all of their resources into that.
El FBI recopila suficiente prueba para obtener una orden en el tribunal y comienza a grabar conversaciones telefónicas y a colocar micrófonos en hogares y vehículos. Entre medio de las miles de horas de grabaciones, los agentes del FBI quedan atónitos al escuchar conversaciones acerca de $7 millones. Rápidamente llegan a la conclusión de que los macheteros son los autores del ataque con el cohete y del robo de la Wells Fargo.
They picked up our trail and, you know, what happened, happened.
Ya para el 1985, el FBI ha recopilado grandes cantidades de prueba que conectan a Segarra con el robo de la Wells Fargo.
This guy followed me, had a big cowboy hat and cowboy boots, you know, so it was pretty noticeable. And then all of a sudden I sense, you know, the guy with the cowboy boots here on one side, and there's 3 other people, one female and 2 other guys around me, and he said, you're under arrest for bank robbery. And you know, it came through, bank robbery? What bank robbery? I haven't done a bank robbery in forever. And then I slowly processed and got, okay, this is about Wells Fargo.
Una redada del FBI arresta a 11 macheteros y les presenta cargos por conspiración en el robo de la Wells Fargo. A Segarra y Ojeda Ríos los encarcelan sin fianza. Inicialmente, el gobierno piensa imputarle al grupo cargos por conspiración sediciosa, intentar derrocar el gobierno de los Estados Unidos.
Filiberto and I were in this facility for about a year during the pretrial hearings. They have like a list of pictures of like the 10 inmates that you need to be on the lookout for correctional officers, you know. And so that piques their curiosity. And so we talk, and it's not too hard, you know, for an American to understand independence, you know, and to understand that, you know, if somebody invaded your country, what would you do? You know, how would you feel if you'd lost the war against the Japanese and every law that was passed here in the United States had to be approved by the Japanese Congress? Oh, well, that's not fair. Yeah, tell me about it, you know. Guys would get it. And you know, Americans don't have a problem with violence at all. I mean, if anything, you know, they're too prone to violence. So the fact that we had resorted to violence for that, you know, in favor of independence or the freedom of our country or whatever is like, well, yeah, of course.
A Segarra y Filiberto Ojeda, junto con los otros acusados, los mantienen en detención con antelación a juicio durante 2 años, confinados a sus celdas por hasta 23 horas diarias.
Ser un machetero es ser un terrorista.
No, muy equivocada. Nosotros repudiamos y yo personalmente repudio el terrorismo.
Pero es una actividad delictiva, es un delito.
Bajo el derecho internacional, bajo cualquier ley justa, el luchar por la independencia de su país no puede ser delito en ningún sitio. Los mismos americanos lucharon por la independencia de su país. Es curioso porque aquí cerca, en Lexington, hay un monumento a los soldados británicos que los Minutemen, que así se llamaban, los patriotas clandestinos de Massachusetts en aquel entonces, emboscaron a los soldados británicos y los mataron cuando iban a traer una orden de allanamiento.
Pero Segarra. Para alguna gente en Puerto Rico y en otras partes del mundo, las actuaciones de los macheteros, tus actuaciones, pueden ser actuaciones patrióticas, o sea, heroicas de patriotas, pero para otra gente son sencillamente actos de delincuencia, de terrorismo. En esos extremos, ¿cómo te percibes y cómo te ubicas? ¿Como un patriota o como un delincuente?
Yo aspiro a servir a mi patria. En ese sentido me considero patriota.
¿Te consideras un héroe?
No.
Luego de 2 años de encarcelamiento, un juez determina que la detención con antelación a juicio era inconstitucional y liberan a los acusados bajo fianza. Le colocan a Filiberto Ojeda un grillete electrónico para asegurar que no se fugue. El 23 de septiembre del 1990, enfrentando una posible condena de 130 años, Filiberto Ojeda corta su grillete y una vez más se va a la clandestinidad. A Segarra lo hallan culpable y lo condenan a 55 años de cárcel.
Ours was the second largest robbery in the U.S. at the time, and the people from the first largest robbery and the third largest robbery got 15 years. I was sentenced to 65. It's common practice to use your spouse as leverage in order to try to get you to flip. So, you know, they applied that pressure. Lucy got the message to me, says, if you cooperate, don't do it on account of me, because if you do, I'll never speak to you again. You know, I didn't need any more encouragement than that. When Lucy got busted, Lucy didn't know she was pregnant, so she accepted the plea agreement and went away. for the rest of her sentence. And while she was in prison, Sulena was born. Lucy, visiting hours from 8 to 3:30, so Lucy could breastfeed Sulena. So the first day that happens, the guard says that breastfeeding is not allowed. They got to work on that and they filed a lawsuit. And the judge that saw it there in Lexington said it'll be a sad day in America where a woman has to sue in order for the right to breastfeed her child.
For me, prison wasn't that bad, but for my family it was. The kids are young, you know, and so they have a hard time. And my dad never believed that I was okay. You know, and I'd tell him, hey, I'm doing fine, I'm, you know, working out. And in solidarity to his dying day, he slept on a cot. He wouldn't sleep on a bed because he figured I was on a cot. I was on a bed, it wasn't, you know, so, but yeah.
I did go in very angry, not looking at my weaknesses and my errors and my lack of patience and my arrogance. And in prison, I was fortunate to be able to work on that.
It became more of a, you know, spiritual and Gandhian understanding of the way to promote change.
Clearly, I think violence is not the way to go, and in fact is counterproductive. I think it feeds into what, lack of a better word, the system really wants.
En el 1999, el presidente Bill Clinton le ofrece un indulto a Segarra y a otros 11 puertorriqueños con la condición de que renuncien al terrorismo. Luego de haber cumplido 19 años de cárcel, Juan Segarra sale de la cárcel en el 2004.
I agree with Don Pedro Albizu Campos, who said that courage is the supreme quality for a revolutionary. When courage is fueled by, you know, the desire to serve or out of love, then it's an entirely different thing, you know, and that's the well that, you know, I want to draw from.
Quiero volver a conocer y disfrutar de los paisajes y la comida y las playas y todo de Puerto Rico. Quiero escuchar, aprender, sí, el coquín. Quiero escuchar, aprender de ustedes y ver en qué forma me toca poner mi granito de arena para ser un instrumento de paz para el bien de todo Puerto Rico.
I believe strongly that the decision the president made was the wrong one and may well have some terrible impacts down the line. Some have described these prisoners as political prisoners. I don't believe they were. They were terrorists, pure and simple. There's no question in my mind that we will seek out, we will hunt down, and we will punish severely people who practice terror against the United States of America.
Mientras tanto, Filiberto Ojeda Ríos continúa en la clandestinidad, evadiendo al FBI. El FBI ofrece una recompensa de $500,000 a cambio de información que lleve a su arresto, pero hay pocas pistas. Él está en constante movimiento, siempre cambiando de disfraz.
The people that was underground was people that already have warrants to be arrested. But most of the time was people above ground moving people underground, like looking for food, like getting in a new house. We never get the same meeting in the same place.
En el 1990, una teleperiodista recibe una comunicación en la cual le ofrecen una entrevista a Filiberto Ojeda. Ella acepta estar con los ojos vendados y ser transportada a un lugar para llevar a cabo una entrevista de varias horas.
Tenemos que reafirmarnos como seres humanos. Yo como puertorriqueño reclamo ese derecho y prefiero morir en ese reclamo que vivir de rodillas. Y eso, si es lo único que puedo por lo menos dejarle al pueblo cuando muera, por ese ejemplo, pues que lo tenga. Váyase de este país, que este no es su país, este es el país nuestro.
La entrevista de Filiberto se transmite sin editar en la televisión puertorriqueña y es el programa de mayor audiencia en la historia de Puerto Rico. En septiembre del 2005, el FBI cree que ha localizado a Filiberto Ojeda en un área remota, en un barrio rural, en una colina. El 13 de septiembre, el FBI se despliega a 25 millas del hogar de Filiberto. Transportan a 200 agentes al lugar. 22 de septiembre, 3 a.m., francotiradores centinelas inician una vigilancia de la residencia antes del amanecer. 23 de septiembre, 3:45 p.m., el equipo del FBI recibe una decisión de visto bueno para un asalto de emergencia. 10 miembros del equipo abordan 2 helicópteros. 4:25 p.m., un vehículo de asalto derrumba el portón de la residencia de Filiberto. Un agente dispara una granada de concusión. 4:28 p.m. se reciben disparos provenientes de la casa. 8 miembros del equipo devuelven el fuego, haciendo más de 100 disparos. Un agente resulta herido. 4:48 p.m. Filiberto grita: «¡Alguien va a salir!». Ordena a su esposa Beatriz a que salga de la residencia. Una vez bajo custodia, ella se rehúsa a hablar con los agentes del FBI. 5:03 p.m. Ojeda solicita que se presente un periodista al lugar para fungir como negociador. 6 p.m. El agente del FBI a cargo rechaza la solicitud de Filiberto. 6:08 p.m. Un agente ve que se enciende una luz del refrigerador y le quita el seguro a su rifle M4. 3 segundos más tarde, coloca la mira de su arma en el centro de masa de Filiberto y hace 3 disparos. En Washington, oficiales de alta jerarquía del FBI ordenan al equipo que no entren a la casa. Finalmente, al mediodía del día siguiente, casi 18 horas luego de los disparos, el FBI entra a la residencia y encuentran a Filiberto Ojeda muerto en el piso. El informe de autopsia establece que se desangró por causa de una herida de bala y que hubiera sobrevivido si hubiese recibido atención médica inmediata y cuidado quirúrgico.
The human body has 5 liters of blood, and they only recovered from the autopsy half a liter of blood. So he bled to death. How long it took for that death? More than an hour.
Estamos aquí a espaldas mías con el hogar, su casa, donde fue asesinado vilmente por el FBI. Hoy, previo a llegar aquí, pues nos despertamos a las 6 de la mañana, con ganas de ver lo que iba a suceder y compartir con el pueblo puertorriqueño. Es indignante ver la cantidad de huecos en la pared, de los balazos, la forma en que dejaron la casa, la sangre de él. Cobarde, cobarde. Cowards, because that's the way they have to be called cowards, cobardes. Esto no se puede comparar. This cannot be compared with anything that I have ever seen in my whole life. You don't treat a human being like that.
I spent the whole night hoping that, he had some tunnel and had been able to get out, because, they kept saying that the place was surrounded and that he hadn't come out. And it was only later that we learned that they had shot him and just refused to provide any kind of medical attention until after he was dead. It was more of a physical feeling. There's really nothing that you could put into words. It was just, in the gut, in the heart, just.
El operativo del FBI y la muerte de Filiberto Ojeda ocurrieron el 23 de septiembre, en el aniversario del Grito de Lares, el día en que se conmemora el primer levantamiento en contra de los españoles en el 1868, el día que muchos consideran el nacimiento de la lucha por la independencia.
Filiberto was viewed by the federal government as the most important advocate for the independence of Puerto Rico. So he had to be killed, and that's why they killed him. To us, that's no surprise. That's the story of the United States.
Los americanos tendrán que responder por el crimen que hicieron contra nuestro héroe, no solamente contra él, sino contra toda la tierra y contra Dios mismo que nos creó. Así que adelante, a ser libres y soberanos, porque así lo demanda la sangre derramada de los mártires. Gracias por Filiberto y por los mártires. Gracias porque somos un pueblo escogido de esos tiempos. Gracias por el ejemplo que estamos dando al mundo de que hemos de ser libres ya mismo, Señor, de su propia voluntad. Amén.
La reacción del pueblo ha sido lo que no esperábamos. El pueblo completo ha reaccionado, ha denunciado este vil crimen, ha trascendido todas las líneas partidistas, todos los partidos, personajes, personalidades, la religión, religiosos.
que el FBI está pisando en arena movediza. Que nos ayuden a hundirlo fuera de nuestro terruño los malditos federales.
We'll find out. We'll see what happens, as they say. Meanwhile, I'm behind on preparations. But that's Sumner.
With me. We have come a long way from lower junior English, haven't we?
Absolutely, man.
That fucking corner that you and I hung out in. How the hell are you?
I am so glad to see you.
Good to see
that
you
was a
too.
great. That was.
I don't think there was any indication that you were a revolutionary. Or
Well, I was
anything
here?
when
Oh,
you were here.
not at all, no.
I mean, you were just a nice guy and enjoyed things here and enjoyed the people here. And
one of the reasons I came back this weekend, after not having been here for 25 years, is I was curious how we all turned out. And of course, that's complicated.
Hi. One question that comes to mind is, when we were all here in school, did I think I was a girl? No. Did I think I was a girl trapped in the body of a boy? No. Did I often wish I was a girl? Oh yeah, absolutely. Because girls are so amazing, I assumed everybody did.
Never choose a profession when you're on an LSD trip. Baxter and Peter knows that's exactly what I did. I decided, having watched Perry Mason TV shows, that I'd become a lawyer. When I came down from that LSD trip, I thought, you know, if I just keep saying this, I'll keep my father off my ass. You have to empower yourself because no one else will do it for you.
One cigarro.
Nowadays, when I meet people from the States in Puerto Rico, I make a point of pronouncing my name very Hispanically. I say Juan Segarra. And then I tell them the story about when I went to a mixer here. And Raj Wheaton was talking to a couple of girls, and I went over to introduce myself. I said, "One cigar." One of them said, "No, thank you, I don't smoke." So, right after I left here and had that, what many people have talked about, the road less traveled inkling, I went to Broadway and saw The Man of La Mancha. So I then went tilting after windmills and joined the armed clandestine struggle for the independence of Puerto Rico. And did that until I got arrested in 1985. So when I went into prison, one of the lawyers in our case had given me a book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, in which he posited that we have a freedom that can never be taken away from us, and that is how we're going to react regardless of what situation we faced. Hey,
Hindsight is 20/20. Well, clearly, as someone who's now 68 years old, to think of, okay, what would I do differently back in 1972? Because somebody had to be willing to fight.
He was a very smart devil, is what he was like. And I didn't think he would be beguiled by that level of radicalism. You know, I thought that he would see that his route lay through politics and influence and the ability to manipulate society, not through doing, you know, criminal acts. He would have been much more effective as the governor of Puerto Rico.
Well, I think that nonviolent resistance and civil disobedience are important tools. Maybe there should be more of it. I mean, it's looking like these times call for urgent action.
Yeah, and it's not coming from him. There's a lot of disrespect coming from him. The president was disregarding our lives. People were dying. FEMA keeps putting these numbers out. Oh, we have given San Juan, you have given San Juan shit. So it isn't that they can't do it, it's that they won't do it. Why? Because our lives don't matter to them. The biggest humanitarian crises that Puerto Ricans have lived under for more than 500 years, it's colonialism. It is a powerful weapon of domination on every front.
In a real sense, Carmen Yulín was able to be the voice of people who weren't just, and excuse the expression, kissing ass to Trump, But I think that, it was important for the story to be heard and people know the magnitude of it, and she was an important voice in doing that.
FBI, asesino. FBI, asesino. FBI,
The U.S., we must remember, was a colony. It fought against colonialism. It is a shame that being a country that was born fighting colonialism is now imposing colonialism on Puerto Rico. It is impossible to continue our condition. Every aspect of a democratic society implies the right to vote for those who govern the people. We have been as a territory for more than a century. That condition cannot be afforded anymore.
People in Puerto Rico have been told that we are too little, that we are too small, that we are too weak, and that we are too poor to be independent. Colonialism at this point is a remnant of the Cold War. It's like a dinosaur. This is a problem that is not going to go away. So far, it's a thorn in the side of the United States, but it can become an infection.
Have you ever been in a situation so overwhelming, so devastating and so difficult that you have no idea how things are going to turn out? You do know one thing, no matter what, nothing will ever be the same. You know that literally you're in the fight for your life. And in the midst of all that chaos, you must answer a profoundly personal question. What are you prepared to do? Look around the world we live in. It is filled with violence, discrimination, poverty, and injustice. We must collectively answer the question, what are we prepared to do to change the course of the world we live in? The answer will no doubt be a challenge, but I assure you, we are all up to the task.
Esto es un mensaje de parte del residente Calle 13 para todo el gobierno y para todos los puertorriqueños. Dani, métele ahí. Queridos compatriotas, abogados, maestros, alcaldes y chotas, doctores, bichotes, bomberos, enfermeros, contables, traqueteros, piragüeros, todo el mundo entero, por mi madre que hoy me disfrazo de machetero y esta noche voy a ahorcar a 10 marineros. Hoy tengo la mano aniquilada y a mano pelada les voy a dar una pela para que vean que el gas pela. Nuestra bandera la han llenado de meao, murió desangrado, mi gente que murió desangrado, nunca arrodillado, lo van a tener que enterrar parado con el machete al lado. Que se activen la Perla, Llorén, Barbosa, Manuela, Caimito, Vista Hermosa, Covadonga, Camarones, Altura, Torre Sabana, Villa Esperanza, Sabana Bajo, Villa Fontana, Gladiola, Villa Carolina, el pueblo de Trujillo, Las Parcelas, San John, Monteatillo, Canales, San José, Río Grande, Luquillo, Puerto Tierra, Santurce, Monacillo, urbanizaciones, caserío. El FBI se ha metido en un lío, están jodidos, se jodió la Casa Blanca. Ahora voy a explotar con estilo en el nombre de Filiberto Ojeda Río. Me tumbaron el pulmón derecho, pero todavía respiro. Me voy a los tiros, pero todavía respiro. A los federales con piedra les tiro, y si no hay piedra pues les tiro con guiro. Con lo que sea, tumbaron al hombre pero no a la idea. A todos los federales los escupo con diarrea. Me dan náusea, me dan asco. Yo sé que estoy perdiendo los cascos por culpa de ustedes, jodidos brutos. La calle 13 está de luto. Con calma, compi, hay que ser astuto. Cállate, fucking federales, gandules y guardias estatales que no hicieron nada con las manos cruzadas, se quedaron mamándose un bicho. Fucking cabrón gobierno que permite esto. Chorro de puercos, son todos unos insectos y por eso protesto. Protesto por una masacre en Ponce, protesto por un Cerro Maravilla y hasta por un septiembre 11. Lucha, lucha, como lucha libre, por la libre, viva Puerto Rico libre. Hay mucho tiburón en el Caribe, 100 por 35.